Hello, welcome to Revenant Reads. I'm Vin, and this is another edition of Fresh Red Kills. So, Fresh Red Kills is where I talk about books that I have recently finished reading. I'm going to be talking about 3 nonfiction history books. All of them I read for Historathon Q2. Historathon is an event that I created, and I've got great co-hosts going along with me, where we read, we discuss, and we celebrate nonfiction history throughout the year. We divide the year up into 4 quarters, each quarter looking at a different time period. We are currently in Q2, which looks at the years 500 to 1500. And people who want to participate, they can read any nonfiction history anywhere in the world. If it just falls within that time period, 500 to 1500, they have read something for Q2. Now, April has turned out to be a very good reading month for me. It is just one of those months where I got reading time, and also when I got the reading time, I was able to really focus on the reading. I mean, there are certain times of the year where I find myself, my eyes getting, tired very quickly. It just hasn't really happened this month. I've just kind of been burning through books at a rate that I don't usually go through them. And I'm hoping it keeps up, but I'm sure it won't forever. But just going to talk about the 3 most recent. Again, I've already finished some books this month before that I've made other Fresh Red Kills videos about. And these are the 3 latest. So the first one is Valkyrie, The Women of the Viking World. This is by Johanna, Katrin, Fridriksdottir. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. I'm pretty sure that she is the wife of Anders Winroth, who is also a Norse or Viking historian. Last year I read his, I think it was the Viking Age, or the Age of the Vikings. It was a really good introductory text into the Viking world that I would recommend. Now, this, of course, looks at women and is published by Bloomsbury Academic. Now, I think that this photograph is a nice photograph, but it is a little bit misleading. One of the things that she sort of is correcting is the popular notion of Viking women. Were there women who probably fought? Yeah, there were probably some, but most of them didn't. We do have saga accounts of women taking up arms and fighting, but most of those sagas were written, or they take place in time periods that are many centuries removed, even sometimes from the Viking Age. So they're a little bit more fantasy. The kind of sagas that we have that were more realistic, that dealt with events that were closer to the time the sagas were written, you don't really see women like shield maidens and this sort of thing. So what she has done here is talk about women in the Viking Age, and she has organized the book kind of like throughout through a lifetime. In the very beginning, first she talks about some legends, like the Valkyries, how in popular culture sometimes they're depicted as these kind of beautiful women taking men from the battlefield, but in the Viking Age are probably far more feral. If you have seen the Northmen, and you've seen that Valkyrie carrying the main character through the sky on the horse, looking in a battle rage, that's probably what a Valkyrie was like. So she kind of clears up that misconception. And then the book basically goes from birth through teenage years to motherhood, to widowhood, into old age, and at the end talking a little bit more about women's role in, magic and ritual, some religious functions that they can serve. And she does a really nice job with this. There are some images, throughout as well. It's nicely organized. We got some great full color pictures in the middle here. And of course, in addition to, you can see a stone. I will say that one of the things, this is very, very heavily based upon the sagas. So I would say almost like 90% of the evidence that is examined is basically saga evidence. Which is, there's nothing exactly wrong with that. My assumption is that we are very limited as far as archaeological evidence. And I really like to have a lot of archaeological evidence inside my readings. So I do wish that there was more of that there, but again, it just might not be possible. That is certainly something that I'm aware of. That being said, I do love the sagas, and it was nice to get the kind of exegesis of the sagas, to tease out what it tells us about women of the Viking Age. In addition to the saga analysis, we have some discussion about some of the stones. You saw one of the rune stones in a photograph that I showed you. And we do get some archaeological evidence, but it makes up certainly a minimal amount compared to the sagas. So if you are interested in women in the Viking Age, and you are okay with it being very, very heavily saga-based, again, this is still a very scholarly look at the sagas, then I would definitely highly recommend this. I wouldn't call it it's not necessarily like a page-turner, but it does a very good job at what it looks at, what it at least seeks to accomplish. Yeah, I'm tripping over my words. What it seeks to accomplish, I do think it does accomplish, and it definitely gave me some nice insight into the Viking Age, at least from the perspective of women. So I appreciated this. I read this as a buddy read with Debs over at Rainer Reads, one of my co-hosts for Historathon, and also Stephanie Cohen, a subscriber. And it was nice hearing some of their thoughts. Let me see. The next thing that I read was this. This is something that I picked up in a secondhand bookstore. Robert the Bruce, King of Scots by Ronald McNair Scott. This was originally published in the 1980s. I think this came out in 1982 in Europe, and then in the United States, it was published in 1989, I believe. Now, the little research that I did behind this book, Ronald McNair Scott, it seems like he was not necessarily a historian, he was a literary critic. But Robert the Bruce was kind of a pet project of his. He spent many, many years researching and then, basically coming up with this biography. And he does a really good job. I mean, it's certainly a popular biography. It's not scholarly. He does base his biography on a lot of primary sources. And he basically combines them to tell this is a riveting story. I had, of course, known about Robert the Bruce originally growing up, from his depiction in Braveheart. As I got older, I found out and, of course, realized more and more that Braveheart is not very historically accurate. It's got a lot of issues. And the Robert the Bruce inside that movie does not really reflect the real Robert Bruce at all. And then a few years back, I think it was 2018, the Netflix film came out, Outlaw King, which from what I understood, reading about it, was a far more accurate depiction of Robert the Bruce. And when I was at a book sale last year, I saw this and I thought, you know what, he's definitely a figure I'm more interested in, I'm interested in learning more about. And so I picked this up and I'm really glad that I did. This ended up being, I said that Valkyrie wasn't exactly a page turner. This really was a page turner. I got through this pretty quickly. It was compulsive reading. I was just kind of, flipping through and tearing through it pretty good, at a pretty good rate. Now, if you've seen The Outlaw King, that pretty much makes up, I think, around the first, what was Loudon Hill in this? Maybe like the first third of this book. So everything that happens after that, I really had no idea about. But it's really a fascinating story. And you can tell that Scott really admires Bruce. This is a very sort of fawning biography of Bruce. It does not pretend to be impartial. He really celebrates when Bruce outsmarts somebody like Edward II. And there is some, like I said, he bases this in a lot of primary sources, or at least older sources. Some of those sources, though, were written, even hundreds of years after Bruce. And he does, I think, mix the maybe apocryphal with the stuff that's a little more reliable. I noticed that it was around page 99, at a point where Robert the Bruce, who's really, he is just like this outlaw on the run. It's amazing, just, to really get this clear. His story is really, really amazing. How he goes from basically on the run with a bunch of outlaws, a ragtag band, to end up becoming, of course, King of Scotland. But he really was, based on this book, at least how it shows him, very good with strategy and tactician, and really seems to have been a pretty solid king. But there's a point where he's on the run and he's all alone. The companion that he was with actually ends up being killed. They're attacked by these guys that they had come across in the night, who end up trying to betray them. His companion is killed, and Bruce kills the other guys. And so he's all alone. And he comes to this cottage with this woman and basically reveals that he is the king. And she says, "Where's your men?" He says, "I have none." And she says, "Well, I have 3 sons. Basically, you can have my sons as your army." And he like tests the skills of these sons, and like the first one shoots 2 crows with 1 arrow, and the second one shoots 1 crow with an arrow, and the third one misses. And this whole story sounds very legendary, something that was made up and told afterwards. Again, this is just my interpretation, but Scott talks about it as though, you know, it happened just like all the things, like Bannockburn happened, and Loudon Hill. So, you know, you have to, I think, understand that with this. This is a popular biography, but it was my first time reading anything about this time period. I had never read any kind of medieval Scottish history before, and I certainly had a lot of fun with it. And then just to finish it off, talk about one more book. I read The Year 1000, When Explorers Connected the World and Globalization Began by Valerie Hansen. So this is a book that I'm still kind of wrapping my head around exactly how I feel about it. She is basically positing that globalization began, not that it was accomplished, not that it was finished, but it began hundreds of years before people generally think it did. It didn't really begin with modern Europe. It began as far back as right around the year 1000. That's kind of a nice round number. One of my issues is that her definition of globalization is kind of vague at times, and she's really talking mostly about trade routes opening up right around the year 1000, and then following those trade routes and their effects in the centuries after. In addition to trade routes, we also get some discussion of religious conversion, things like Islam spreading and other kingdoms adopting Christianity. So all of this, in her assessment, adds up to the world already becoming more globalized, that the process was basically beginning. And I guess I can kind of accept that. I don't know if everything really gels together as I'm reading it, though. It does feel like sometimes we're getting lost in the details, and we kind of lose sight of the thesis. Now, one of the things I did like about this is that it introduced me to a lot of history that I just didn't really know about, because it really is a world history. It is a global history. So she starts off really with a discussion of the Vikings and their excursion into North America. Then she does end up talking more about the Americas and trade routes among Mesoamerica, especially, and in what is today the United States. We talk about Africa, especially sub-Saharan Africa. We talk about a lot with Asia. I believe that she's an expert in China, I believe. So I was introduced to a lot of history that I just really didn't know much about. So I appreciated that. But, like I said, I kind of felt like the book became unfocused at times, kind of like she was, like the author was kind of dumping a lot of her notes, maybe from like note cards that she had taken, and I couldn't always see exactly where the globalization was occurring. So overall, I mean, I liked it, but it wasn't like a home run for me. It didn't knock it out of the park. And you can tell, I think, at certain points, like when she's talking about the Vikings, that not that she gets things like really wrong, but the way that they're described, you can tell that she's not really an expert in that field. So I'm assuming that people who read other areas, like when she's talking maybe about the Maya, or she's talking about the Mali Empire or something like that, there's probably other things that people will pick up and realize, that maybe she's not deeply read in those areas. But, again, I still found it quite interesting. We have some maps in here. We got quite a few full-color images in the middle. I'm just trying to look for some of the maps. In addition to that, we do get, I just had it, come on, maps like this, which were okay. I kind of found the maps a little bit vague and wasn't quite sure what I was supposed to be seeing in some of these things. But overall, this is an I would say, an okay read. I wouldn't call it a strong recommend. I thought that the other two were just much better reads for me overall. The Year 1000 was all right. But as I said before, I'm still kind of wrapping my head around this one in terms of how I feel about it. So my opinion could adjust either, up or down over time. I'm not entirely sure where I land with this one yet. But those were the things that I most recently finished reading. So first there was, once again, Valkyrie, Women of the Viking World, Robert the Bruce, which was a lot of fun, and The Year 1000. That's it. If you've read these, love to hear your thoughts. And as always, thank you, BookTube.